So, hello everyone. Just now, a little surprise because we are not two, but we are three. We have a big support from Denmark, and you will learn more about Kevin. And today, because we are 3 days before New Year, and the year probably will deliver a lot of changes on a global scale. And let's talk about it. Let's talk how the wasteless world will look in not tomorrow, but in 10 years, maybe 20 years. Let's see how the changes, how we see the changes from three different countries, from three different perspectives. And before we start, I would like to ask you, how was your week? Starting with Bill this time, because according to my news in Czech Republic, you have to be covered with snow up to the chimney.
My week has been good. Great Christmas with the family, all the traditional, um, big, too much food, a lot of laughing, and all good. And the weather is overplayed. Um, we have no snow. We are in Connecticut, an hour north of New York City, right on the Long Island Sound. No snow. It was cold. We had a storm, which here we call a nor'easter, which means that it's coming out of the northeast. And when it comes out of the northeast, what it does is it pushes the tides, the storm surge. It pushes it into Long Island Sound, which is like a big V, and so there's no place for the water to go, and so we had very high tides. Our condo is about 30 feet above the water, and the waves were splashing onto the grass at the top of that. So it was very interesting. We spent the day yesterday digging two kayaks. I don't know who they belong to, but they had come loose during the storm and had been buried in sand. And so we spent a good part of the day yesterday digging the kayaks out of the sand and taking them to curb for somebody to come and get. So thank you for asking, Michael, and I'm looking forward to the new year as well and the changes that it will bring.
What about you, Kevin? How was your week?
It was fun. Copenhagen is a cozy city, and Christmas is extremely cozy. So we spent the evening eating duck, red cabbage, dancing around the tree, singing. It was really nice. And we don't have snow either. It's pouring down with rain. And the big fear is that it's going to rain on New Year's Eve, because the city goes absolutely crazy for fireworks. And last year we had fog. It didn't stop anyone firing off millions of kroners of fireworks. You just couldn't see anything. So hopefully this year we'll have some, at least a clearer evening. I live up on the 13th floor right in the harbor, so I can see out over the whole city. And it's just the most amazing view. So I'm looking forward to seeing the end of the year and a good start to 2023.
Just speaking about the weather, here in Pilsen is today -5. But on New Year's Eve should be 15.
Wow.
So generally 20-degree difference in 3 days, which is unusual, but it's already become somehow a habit generally. And this is how we talk about the changes. So if we speak about it, we see big changes on the political side. Of course, Russia, China, India, and all the players behave differently than before. And the question is, because from my point of view, and I tell it several times already on this Wasteless World Talks, China is enclosing, on my opinion. So they will stay behind a big Chinese wall, just turned around the globe. Russia is already closed in some way. India is somewhere in the middle. But I think that the term glocalization, so instead of globalization, it expresses it quite well. And I just have a few discussions today with partners and clients speaking about international cooperation, but in very different aspects. So the countries start to understand that firstly, they must be strong to provide help to others. And if I speak about India and solar, for example, so the Indian government put a 40%, I think, duty on solar modules, not to export them, because firstly is the Indian market there should be covered. After it can be the world. So this is, from my perspective, globalization will become, and luckily we show already that we are not dependent so strongly as expected to Russia. And we will show, or the world will show exactly the same to Russian goods. So it will be boost of economics in the countries, because we will start producing again what was moved before to cheap labor in China. That's my view on the nearest happenings, I will say. What about you?
Well, we're seeing much the same thing here. Supply chain disruptions for the last 2 years, and so they just announced that they're building very large chip making factories in Ohio, which is in the middle of the country, and becoming more self-sufficient. A lot of the manufacturers, I would say most or all of the manufacturers, have redesigned their product so that it uses components that are locally sourced. And in all my years, I've never seen anything like this. And I had a discussion yesterday about the cheap labor, because I remember in the 1980s, I remember the Chinese coming over and visiting us, trying to get us to build a factory in China. I remember everybody talking about how the average American wage was, I forget what it was, $20 an hour, something like that. And in China, it was $1 or $1.50 an hour. So it was a 10 times difference. And that's all the reason that we need to shut down our factories and move everything to China. And in fact, that's what we did. And what we did not do is we did not think about the other costs, the environmental cost, because they have no environmental or very few environmental laws in China. So we are helping to pollute the world by making things there. They do not have the labor laws, so there's a large cost in kind of a difficult cost to put a number on. But they have very few labor laws there. So there are many, many costs that we invested in without realizing it. And of course, the big cost recently has been the supply chain disruptions, where we did not have products, and certainly there is a cost to that. So I'm hoping going forward that we can look at costs more holistically, more realistically, and recognize that this big attraction of low labor rates, which are not as low anymore, but we were very short-sighted in doing that, and we paid the price. So going forward, and we are developing new supply chains, and I hope that we will have learned some of that lesson, so that the supply chains will be more better considered, and that more fully costed before we make a decision. And one of the costs is waste, and in so many different forms. Michael, as you have been saying for 10 years. And so as we are developing new supply chains and developing new ways of manufacturing and automation and so on. The waste is the biggest cost, not one of the biggest costs, but the biggest cost of everything that we're doing. And so I think that your voice is so necessary, and we have to make it louder and keep talking about it so that people will include that in the calculation.
I think you are right, and I think that Kevin has a very rich experience in different industries and in different approaches, and I think that your opinion will be very interesting, or your comment on the development, because you've been really, I do not want to go in details, you can of course, really deep in the structures.
Yeah, what I've been thinking is that with the increased use of military equipment, that the waste, of course, there's military equipment by definition is not going to have any return policies, any recycling. It's not made to be recycled, it's made to be used. But just generally, the amount of pollution that military equipment generates, both in its manufacture and in its use, especially in terms of jet aircraft and heavily mechanized military vehicles, it is a menace. Of course, no government is going to want to regulate their own military. So it is a source of waste and a source of pollution that is totally unaccountable to anybody. And it's not a criticism of the military, it is a criticism of the war in general. So I can understand now that every country wants to increase their defense spending, which is fine as long as they don't use it. As soon as you use it, it is just so wasteful. It is just the worst way to burn through resources you could ever imagine, both human, material, and natural.
It's generally one of the most unlogical steps. We would like to live in peace. To do so, we need to build military. Generally, at the moment, the most profitable industries, three: war industry, crude oil industry still, and waste industry. And crude oil industry is in a trouble, so it's expected generally that war and waste will be two most profitable industries in the world. One generate the other.
Yeah.
So it's like really the people, and I don't think it's about people, it's about humans. It's generally the decision makers, let's call them so, that they completely ignore the logic and the fact that they are really poisoning totally everything by concentrating only on money and profit. I just read before this meeting on Finextra, there was a published quite interesting article. One of the editor asked whether the year 2023 will be the year of 4 days working week. And I read the article, it was quite nice, but generally I commented that I hope that it will be the year of meaningful work without limitation of the work time or limit. Because, you know, especially in a COVID time when we start with the remote working, using the technology which was here, but nobody used it before, just for fun, we use it. We have found out that we can do the work which we have to do 5 days, 8 hours a day, we can do in 1 or 2 days, easily. But the law and regulations did not change according to that. And here we are again to the countries which has very different approach to work. India has different approach to work. China has different approach to work. Russia, you know, I am from socialist countries, so I know very well the Russian approach. I was there for 1 month when I was a student, and I never remember, never forgot. They we step in a bus, they deliver us to the field, and it was about 800 meters long. So really, comparing to our fields, very, very long. There was just this, there should be potatoes, but you saw only this wheat. And they say, you have to take the wheat out. But the wheat was about our height. And we did. There was few potatoes in the line, but all the rest was wheat. And the Russians there, they said, you know, we don't care. We are big enough. So this was the approach. So they really do not aim too much toward hard. They have another interest. So I think that this approach towards, or at least what we are trying with Industry 5.0 to deliver meaningful work, should be the biggest change. Because Excel sheet does not make you happy. But if you touch the cup which you made with your hands, you will feel it every time when you drink out of it, that it's made by the hands of a man. And that will be the difference. So I think this differences in the approach to work will resonate strongly. And I hope the wasteless world will unify all the countries, no matter where the people will work.
I hear that there's a big problem in China at the moment, the way their factories are geared up. They have a lot of factories specialized in building components for pre-constructed houses. They have other factories building all the material and machinery to build roads, which they want to pave the whole of Africa with. But the demand isn't there anymore. But because of the way their economy is planned, they're continuing to manufacture these things. And I read this really interesting, it was a shocking thing, that if concrete was a nation, it would be the 5th biggest source of CO2 in the world. Because concrete just generates masses of CO2. And everything we're building these days, I mean, Copenhagen Harbor is being built out again at the moment, and it's concrete building after concrete building with one wooden building in the middle of it.
Unfortunately, there is generally every industry is generating a lot of waste. It doesn't matter, you know it. You look around and you see it. I just have, before this meeting, I have another one to the air conditioning and similar a discussion so about the construction business. And it is interesting that no matter which conference you go, if it is about construction building, then the biggest emitter of CO2 emission is construction. If you go to shipping, the biggest emitter is shipping. No matter where you go, every time they use this, because we created this carbon emission economy, which generally does not deliver any results. It just make few very profitable, and the rest thinking they are doing something good, but it's not the case. So what do you think about that?
And then we see the same thing in every industry. As most of my career has been managing in manufacturing companies, but the challenge has always been to get full engagement, or as full as possible engagement, out of each of the people that worked with us, and this engagement, or the lack of the engagement, is a huge waste. So many people come to work, and you've seen it, you've experienced it, and they come to work to get their paycheck, to get their time card punched, and not for the meaningful work. And managers also are guilty of this, because look now at the remote workers. Managers do not know how to manage and to engage the workers when they're remote. It was easy before because if the worker was at their workstation or at their desk by 9 o'clock in the morning and stayed until 5 o'clock, they got a check mark. So they're a good worker. They're sitting in that chair. And now that we're remote, managers need to upskill to learn how to manage and engage, have an environment that the workers want to be fully engaged, and not this 10% engagement of getting my time card punched, but 90% engaged. And that difference, that 80% difference, is one of the biggest wastes that there is, I think. And Michael added the fifth waste to be time, the wasting of time. So the challenge is, we know that it exists. Nobody denies that it exists. So what do we do about it? And so this is, regardless of which industry we're talking about, is the waste of time.
What I think is very interesting is generally that China is, in one aspect, at least from my point of view, it's in a production different from the other countries. If you look at the Chinese producer, the first picture he or she will show you are warehouses full of the same goods. So they do bikes, so full warehouse of bikes. This is the first one they show. So they are aiming volumes, but they don't have the buyers. They just produce. Unfortunately, we copy it in some because it's other investors don't ask whether the investors ask how many pieces you produced, not how many pieces reach the end user. And I think that this will generally disturb most the Chinese economy when they enclose, and they will see there is no the market for that. So they have to change the way how they produce. I just finished yesterday an article about best before or expire date. And I realized generally it's a very interesting topic, because I realized that it's not best before, it's generally best after. Because they producing before introducing, and it's not so old. It's really younger than me generally. It was introduced somewhere in my country, somewhere 1990 or something like that. So it's not really old. And before, the producers communicate with the shops to have the adequate quantity. But right now, we produce a chocolate which has an expiry date in 3 years. So it's not chocolate anymore. It's a chemical substance which can hold for 3 years without any change. It has no taste before, it will not have no taste after, but there is a date. And generally, we completely open the scissors or the communication between producer and the real demand. We call it market demand. Today, it has nothing to do with the reality generally. And I think that these aspects will strongly influence, because this is a waste. We enclose the wasting of time in a product. It's already in the product. In an expire date, it's the wasting of time. It's part of expire date. It's a horrible, horrible situation.
And of course, an expiry date encourages people to consume, because if you buy something and you've got to eat it within 10 days, then you're going to eat it within 10 days.
There are so many aspects which really are connected. And I think that the strongest economies will be those who will understand the mistakes which we have made through following only the economical aims and topics. Only GDP is the key and only money. Just today it was, I think, there was somebody published the South Asian countries with the highest GDP. I think first was Brunei, second was Singapore, and third was Malaysia, or I do not remember. There was a big gap between. And generally, it has nothing to do with reality. They are rich people, and these few rich people make looks like that everybody in the country get every month 16,000 US dollar, but that's not the reality. So we are building, the economical system was built from the very beginning on a very, very not stable groundstones. If I can call it groundstone, I don't think so. It was, I don't know how to call it. I'm not economist. You are more more educated in this field, so you can help me maybe.
The fascinating comparison that you make with expiration dates. I worked at a chemical reference standard, especially chemical company, for a number of years, and the expiration dating, the policy was fascinating. Everybody thinks that there are chemists and scientists in the back room who are very carefully calculating and which of the components is going to start to degrade or no longer be, or whatever, that everything is black and white, it's useful, it's not useful. And in fact, that doesn't exist anywhere. One of the competitors, we did a survey of how everybody calculates the expiration date. One of the competitors told me, I'm holding the telephone, I'm saying, I can't believe I'm hearing this. They said, when enough customers complain, then we mark it as expired. And another company said, everything is 1 year. Which of course is not true, excuse me, because there are certain chemicals that last for an hour or a few minutes or a day, and there are other chemicals, unfortunately, the big polluters, PCBs, for example, will be in the river water when our great-grandchildren are growing up. So everything has a different date, but companies try to figure out a way to not have to go through all the trouble of figuring out what that is. So, and I've got some medicine in my bathroom that expired 2 years ago, and I look at it and I say, am I going to buy some more, or is this still halfway good? So maybe I should take 2 of them, or and in reality, how did they come up with that expiration date? And so I just have not very much confidence that there is sufficient thought that goes into the expiration dates. But you can take that beyond the medicine in the cabinet. We apply that to workers. Right? If you're over 65 or you're over 60 or you're over some date, then what? You're no longer useful. You're no longer, and that's just in our culture. I know that some of the other cultures and the Oriental cultures and so on look at that very differently. But this whole question of expiration dates is fascinating, and as we deal more in the waste and also in the new world order, the changing world order, how do we change these old ways of looking at things, of valuing time and valuing enjoyment, not just 32, as you said, Michael, not just 32 hours in a work week, but meaningful work, so that I don't want to stop working. I enjoy it so much. And so how do we do that beyond the way that you're approaching it, Michael, which is to talk to everybody who will listen to you and to engage people with keynote speeches at the universities, the young people coming up, to start thinking about life in a different way is the most important.
I think Kevin has quite an extensive experience with women labor. So generally the differences between men and women on a workplace, because this is connected as well. This is, we can call it gender, is some way of expiry date.
Yeah, did a lot of work launching UN Women in Germany, and one of the the foundations that launched was just to point out that women have, or they get paid 23% less than men for doing exactly the same job, and there it's outrageous if you think about it. You know, in this day and age, that it still goes on, but this is widespread throughout Germany. And the interesting thing is that the push for change is coming from women, and women in big organizations. So organizations like Mercedes-Benz, they're really happy to take this up and make this an issue and make it part of their employer branding, that they will pay the same for women as they pay for men, because it benefits their brand to do so.
I generally think that the same approach should be for the age, because I don't say that the old ones should take the places of the young ones, but they should work in harmony. And this is what generally in the Europe is in general missing. I think in the US will be similar. The underdeveloped countries, when we call them so, including India, South American countries, they still have this relationship existing. But all the countries which, let's call advanced political system, have a pension. Pension system means you become social waste because you are not interested for the society, interesting for the society. But that's so wrong that really, and what is interesting, that these decisions are made by the people who are older. All of them, or majority of the politician is older. But because they have their own pension secured, they never realize that the world outside of the parliament looks very different.
I was hearing a guy talking once, and he was explaining why there were so many Greek philosophers in ancient times. And he was explaining that it wasn't because they had this amazing education system. He said it's because they had slaves. So the Greeks didn't need to work. So they had time to do other things. And I think the interesting thing is, with a proper labor market, it would be great to give people the opportunity to say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I want to do this for 20 years, I want to do this for 40 years. So there is no ridiculous segregation into you work, then you retire, you disappear from view, you don't appear on public transport during working hours, all that horrible stuff that happens, and give a totally different value to the people who are good at thinking, who are not as productive physically as people who are good in manufacturing. But as a society, generally, we all become much more productive.
Yeah.
We
have 6 more minutes, okay, just for you.
That may be self-correcting, Kevin. I'm hoping, because the birth rate is falling. The replacement rate of 2.1 children per couple is falling, and in some countries is less than 1. I think Denmark is one of them. South Korea is one of them, and so India just became the most populous country, taking it away from China. China's population by the end of the century, which is only 75 years away, right? Our children will see that, our grandchildren anyhow. China is 1.4 billion now, and will be half of that. Will be half of that. And some countries in Africa, the birth rate is 5 or 6, and will become more populous than China. And mixed in with that, some countries are not welcoming to immigrants. And right now, there's a lot of bad news about immigrants in the U.S., but we're a country that's built on immigrants, have always been, and it will be, I think, within a few years, 2030, 2040, the tide is turning. Countries will begin welcoming immigrants and bring those African countries that can no longer because of the climate change or whatever other reason, can't feed their kids, they won't have to sneak across the border. Countries like America and much of the Western world will be telling them, come live with us, and offering them inducements to immigrate to their country because they need people, they need younger people, they need workers, they need people, and that is all changing. So when we need people to work in the factories or to whatever, I think that we will value the underappreciated now. As I'm in my 60s, and I could not go out today and get a job, maybe at McDonald's, but there's so many people that look at my age, and women not getting paid the same as men. How ridiculous is that? And the people who have been arrested, so they have a police record for nonviolent crimes, and so we are exploring. We are getting back into exploring the areas where we can find people to hire. I'm hoping that this is going to be self-correcting, and we will start to treat other people much better.
I generally hope that the wasteless world will be the world without borders, because borders are silos. This is one type of silo. This is mine, this is yours, this is others. We fight for it. There will be no borders. What we will fight for? We will not fight for the tree. We will not fight for the water. If we will share it, of course. So I do not see men or women. I see human. This is why I express myself as a human. And I don't see age. I don't care. It's few years ago, and right now I step in a room and I'm the oldest one, but I don't feel like that. And I don't think I will in the future feel like that. Because if you feel the same with the people around you, you will feel fine. And I just had a discussion yesterday with my mom, which is 73 in the moment. And the best present I gave her and my dad was frame of a chair. Generally a wasted chair, which somebody would like to waste, and I took it and I gave it up to them. And the first response was, "Oh, what is this?" And I explained that I would like them to apply their creativity. And 1 hour later, they came and say, "And can we do it this way or this way?" I said, "You can do it any way you want. It's your chair, it's your project." And if you look in their eyes and you see the purpose found again in a small project, and this is what makes the people feel younger, feel needed. We have only 1 minute, so we check back to the original link, and I would like to say, everyone, because the year 2023 is coming, let your year be free of waste and wasting in all its forms. Stay safe and free. And I hope you will join us next week again, and we will discuss some more topics related to wasteless world, which all of us, we will build together.